Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about, once again, is Israel's Swords of Iron War. That's the name that's been given, Swords of Iron. During the Hamas massacre of October 7th, nearly 1,500 Israelis were murdered and about 5,000 others wounded, maimed, and injured, and another 240 were kidnapped and dragged into Gaza, the Hamas stronghold. And from that horrible day, an erroneous myth about Hamas and the Palestinians was born. It needs to be corrected, and I need to correct it now. After almost every condemnation of Hamas for their despicable, inhuman acts, comes a caveat. A chorus, so to speak, composed of two chants. Hamas is not all Palestinians, and Hamas does not represent the Palestinians. Those statements are patently untrue. For some reason, the erroneous refrain has been learned and is unconsciously repeated by some. By others, however, it has been deliberately repeated, part and parcel of a public relations campaign to turn Hamas into the victim. 1 month later, the time has come to out the lie. The time has come for the truth to be told about this. The statements Hamas is not all Palestinians and Hamas does not represent the Palestinians gives the impression that most Palestinians are not supportive of Hamas. But the facts tell us otherwise. Had the chorus chosen to chant, all Palestinians are not terrorists, they would be correct. That is correct. While just a fraction of Palestinians are terrorists, the figures tell us that an overwhelming majority of Palestinians support Hamas. And that, for Israel and for the Western world, for the entire world, is truly frightening and upsetting. The first of the two most important pieces of evidence disproving the erroneous statements are the results of the 2006 Palestinian parliamentary election. An election that was open to all residents of the West Bank and residents of Gaza. The second piece of information is a poll conducted among over 1,200 Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank in September of 2023, a poll conducted less than a month before the Hamas massacre on October 7, 2023. The results of both the election and the poll are staggering. They demonstrate unequivocally that the overwhelming number of average Palestinians support Hamas over Palestinian Authority leadership. Not by a slight margin, but by an overwhelming margin. Believe me when I tell you that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and his party do not have the popular support of the people they are supposedly governing. Western leaders, especially the United States, want the world to believe that Abbas and his PA can exert control. They cannot. They do not. The West is maintaining that they want Abbas and his PA to take charge of Gaza after this is all over. Given their lack of popularity, that is impossible. They can't even control the West Bank, and the West wants them to control Gaza too? Has the Western world forgotten that Hamas threw Abbas and his PA out of Gaza in 2007 in a brutal, murderous coup? Hamas and the Palestinians certainly haven't forgotten. Here are the numbers. On January 25, 2006, the entire Palestinian polity went to the polls to vote in parliamentary elections. For the first time, Hamas was permitted to run for election. Parenthetically, I was against it. I wrote about it. I advised against it. I spoke about it. I posited that an anti-democratic party, anyone, should not be permitted to run in democratic elections because if they win, they will suspend democracy. No anti-democratic parties are allowed. Hamas should never have been permitted to run. But the United States and the Europeans were not swayed by my argument. They were convinced that the PA would win and that Hamas would fall into line. They were not reading the Palestinian masses, the people. They were listening to the wrong advisors. The election went on as scheduled, and the PA was trounced. When I say trounced, listen to these numbers. Hamas won a whopping 76 seats in parliament. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, won 43 seats, and independents won 4. The Palestinian parliament appointed a Hamas prime minister. Hamas won nearly 2-1, and Abbas promptly took back the parliament by ousting the Hamas prime minister and appointing his own unelected PM in its place. And that's when, as their style is, Hamas violently took over Gaza. 17 years later, from September 6th to September 9th, 2023, in a poll conducted of 1,270 Palestinians, the results were also identical. The poll was conducted by Khalil Shikaki from the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. It determined that in the head-to-head election between Abbas and Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas, Hamas would win. Haniyeh would win 58% of the vote, and Abbas 58 to 37, and then the massacre. Additionally, according to the poll, both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas are seen as overwhelmingly corrupt. 87% of Palestinians see the PA as corrupt, while 72% see Hamas as corrupt. 78% polled demanded Abbas resign. Important lesson number one to be learned from these numbers is that Hamas is representative of the Palestinians. Yes, I repeat, Hamas is representative of the Palestinians. Not all Palestinians, but certainly a significant majority. Those who support Hamas are not necessarily murderers, but they support the murder of Israelis and Jews. Every Palestinian and every Israeli knows that Hamas's charter and knows that the charter's preamble proclaims the destruction of all of Israel and the murder of Jews. It's there. Important lesson number two is that Abbas and the PA are not capable of controlling Gaza and the PA, which leads to an important conclusion. After Israel wins the war in Gaza and Hamas is no longer a threat, Gaza must be handed over to and controlled by an international force. That force should be sponsored and composed by those countries that make up the Abraham Accords. Israel's involvement should be limited to advice and supervision. As the West has demonstrated time and time again, they have no understanding of the Palestinians. It is only those countries that signed the Abraham Accords and with Israel who understand both the Palestinians and Israel. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from the Wall Street Journal, and it's written by Walter Russell Mead. It's entitled, Anti-Semitism Poisons America. Subtitle, Attacks on Jews are also attacks on our ideals of liberalism and pluralism. The column was published on October 30th, 2023. This is how Mead begins. As students, and worse, professors at elite universities across the United States exulted at the news of mass murder and torture of Israelis, Jews, by Hamas terrorists, Jewish students were warned to take precautions on campus. Across the U.S., anti-Semitic incidents, including vandalism, harassment, and assault, are roughly up 400% since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. That is a problem, and not only for American Jews. The beliefs that have made the U.S. a unique, hospitable home for Jewish citizens are essential to national cohesion and strength. If we lose faith in what was once proudly called the American way, there is little chance that society can summon the energy and unity to withstand attacks from our enemies abroad. Mead looks closely at the hospitality of the United States towards Jews and how it is different from Europe. Europe has a long history of Jew hatred, but the United States does not. But things are changing, Mead says. This is how Mead continues. While doing research for my recent book, The Ark of a Covenant, the United States, Israel, and the Fate of the Jewish People, I was struck by the deep connection between America's relative, and I stress relative, immunity to the most virulent forms of anti-Semitism in American faith in democracy and pluralism. From the Middle Ages to the present day, violent anti-Semitism has flourished best among those who reject liberal ideas. Medieval Christian zealots trying to build a seamlessly Christian Europe, nationalists striving for pure societies in which a particular ethnic group establishes its own culture and institutions without the alien influences of ethnic and religious minorities, Islamists who want a pure Islamic state. None of these projected utopias have room for proud and free Jews. As the column continues, Mead explains the nexus of the extremist right and the radical left. He shows that they are united in their hatred of Jews. He writes, 3 things unite 2017's white nationalist marchers in Charlottesville, Virginia, on the illiberal right and today's bile-spewing campus radicals. Both sides worship ethnicity, despise the American way, and hate Jews. The illiberal right claims that America is Caucasian ethno-state and that Jews, blacks, and other inferior groups want to destroy it through immigration and subversion. The campus left shares this conviction but reverses the polarity. Non-white ethnic groups are the good guys and white founders are racists whose legacy needs to be buried. Both groups think Jews are part of the problem. Jew hatred is the most damaging piece of the horseshoe consensus that brings the far left and far right together. This hatred is a sign of mental incapacity and is a barrier to learning. Someone who thinks the Jews control banking doesn't understand how modern economies work. Someone who thinks the Jews control America's media and political systems from the shadows can never really understand how American institutions work. And people who embrace conspiracy theories aren't eager to learn because they think they already understand everything. Mead concludes his column positing that the future he sees does not bode well, not in the United States and not abroad. He writes, history offers hope, but shouldn't make us complacent. We face grave challenges abroad, even as the foundations of unity and concord at home have corroded to a dangerous degree. Those whose job it was to preserve the health of our educational institutions have dramatically and horribly failed, while those charged with American foreign policy have failed to prepare for the challenges coming at us overseas. The Hamas attacks on October 7th unleashed a storm abroad and a storm at home. More storms and worse ones are likely as a disordered America struggles for a balance in a disordered world. Mead is so correct. Jew hatred is destructive to democracy and destructive to the very fabric of freedom, especially in the United States. Next up is an editorial from the Wall Street Journal, and like the column, it was published on October 30th, 2023. The editorial is entitled Global War on the Jews, subtitled Anti-Semitism Surges Even in the West, which shows why Israel exists. This is an excellent editorial. It clearly explains the situation Jews in America face today, that Jews are under attack. The editorial begins, the disturbing fact of the past month is that Jews are under attack, not only in Israel, and not only by Hamas. The weeks since the barbaric October 7th Hamas invasion of Israel have witnessed physical assaults on Jews the world over, including in the United States and Europe. This most modern of pogroms, global, televised, politicized, demonstrates exactly what is at stake as Israel ramps up its defensive war against Hamas in Gaza. Islamist groups and its Western enablers are pursuing or justifying a genocidal war against Jews, not merely a territorial dispute with Israel. And since Western governments too often seem unable to protect the Jewish minorities in their midst, Israel must defend itself as the only safe home for the Jewish people. The editorial now lists just a few of the many huge and frightening attacks perpetrated against the Jews and Jews world over since October 7th. It continues, the weekend, hundreds of rioters in Dagestan, Russia, stormed an airport in search for Jewish travelers. Mobs raided hotels in other parts of the North Caucasus looking for Jews, and the Jewish Community Center under construction in the city of Nalchik was the target of an apparent attack. Germany has witnessed a spate of anti-Semitic incidents, including an attack with Molotov cocktails against a synagogue in Berlin on October 18th. Some Jews found stars of David painted on their homes, an echo of Nazi persecution. The German politicians have been forceful in their denunciations, but apparently not forceful enough in their policing. 2 Jewish schools in London closed for a period over safety concerns, and some British Jews no longer feel safe wearing visible symbols of their faith. They're probably right to worry. The state can't protect them. Tens of thousands of protesters in London, over 3 successive weekends, called for jihad and chanted from the river to the sea, a demand for the erasure of Israel and by extension the citizens. A crowd in Sydney, Australia chanted "Gas the Jews" after the Hamas attack. The editors explain that this hatred is not against Israel. It's against all Jews, they write. These and too many other incidents to count put paid to the notion that one can distinguish anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism since October 7th. If protesters wanted to burn Israeli flags in a fit of wrong-headed pique about a two-state solution, that is one thing. Only anti-Jewish hate can explain how synagogues, children, and airports are targets of this outrage. Yet many Western intellectuals and a growing number of politicians insist on maintaining this false distinction. They've seen what Hamas has done to innocent Israeli civilians and what pro-Hamas protesters have said and done in Western streets. They'd nonetheless forgive any violence by Hamas or Hezbollah against Jews as anti-colonial defiance. This is why Israel is fighting and must fight as hard as it is for its survival as a state, and why it's inexcusable for any Western politician now to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. No leader who is demonstrably incapable of protecting Jews in his own country should try to prevent Jews from defending itself. This is how the West slips from never again into nowhere is safe. This global war on Jews also clarifies what is at stake for Western societies in this fight. The West spent the decades after civilization catastrophe of the Holocaust vowing never again to allow itself to slide into such barbarism. What we see now in the attacks on Jews is how that slide began. Thank you, Wall Street Journal editorial board, but I fear you are preaching to the converted, unfortunately. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 3 cartoons and a picture of a few Israeli soldiers today. The first cartoon has 3 panels. Panel number 1 is a young boy wearing a Palestinian flag shirt. He is agitating a huge beehive with a stick, and the beehive is adorned with the Israeli flag. In the second panel, the bees swarm and attack the boy. He runs away. And in the third panel, the boy stands in front of TV cameras of BBC, CNN, and Fox, pointing at the beehive as if to say the bees attacked him without provocation. We see this happen over and over and over again. Profound almost. This next cartoon is of a hammock. The hammock is supported by college donor financing. It was ripped by a huge wrecking ball called racism, and sitting on the wrecking ball is a student wearing a keffiyeh and holding a sign that reads, "I'm with Hamas." This could not be more true. This third cartoon is a cartoon, and it's a depiction of the Iranian Grand Ayatollah Khamenei. On his head, in place of his traditional keffiyeh, is a 2-headed serpent, Hamas on one side and Hezbollah on the other. Finally, a wonderful picture from social media. You can't look at this picture and not smile. Israeli soldiers joining hands and forming a large Magen David. The significance in their action and in the symbol of Magen David is critical. Magen David is always translated as the Star of David, but what it really means is the shield of David. In other words, the protective shield of David. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Posters of kidnapped Israelis have become another flashpoint in the war between Israel and Hamas. One group of people putting them up, another taking them down. Interestingly, these flyers and posters, relics from the pre-internet age, have not just made a comeback, but they've come back with quite a literal bang. There's a reason for these flyers and posters and photos being such a hot-button issue. Lovers of Israel put flyers up to tangibly show real examples of Jewish victims of Hamas's horrible acts of terror. The other side, Jew haters, are deeply offended and insulted because the posters display the reality of true Israeli victims. But for those who hate, and those who hate Israelis, Israelis can't be victims. For those who hate, Jews are the oppressors. The real victims are only those in Gaza and other Palestinians in this story. It is a battle of victims, and that explains why supporters of Hamas have hijacked the very same pictures and posters and flyers that they initially tore down and scratched out and replaced the word kidnapped above each photo with the word occupier above each photo. Remember who the real victim is in this war. Hamas spokesman and member of Hamas Politburo, Abu Marzouk, was interviewed in Arabic on TV. The interviewer said to Marzouk, "Many people are asking why you built 500 kilometers, that's 300 miles, of tunnels. Why did you not build bomb shelters with all the cement?" In a nutshell, Marzouk's response sums up the Hamas attitude towards Palestinians, towards Israel, and towards the war they are waging with Israel. He explained that Hamas built tunnels to protect Hamas, not Gazan residents, not to protect the Gazan Palestinians, citizens living there. He explained that it was the UN's responsibility to protect the civilians. Quoting Abu Marzouk, he said, "We have built the tunnels because we have no other way of protecting ourselves from being targeted and killed. These tunnels are meant to protect us from airplanes. We are fighting inside the tunnels. Everybody knows that 75% of the people in Gaza are refugees, and that is the responsibility of the United Nations to protect them." You now have a clear understanding of Hamas and their decision-making processes. Civilian lives are irrelevant. Even Palestinian civilian lives are irrelevant. Hamas knew well that Israel would respond to their massacre. They planned the massacre specifically so that Israel would enter Gaza, and that was part of the Hamas plan. The more Palestinians who die, the better in the eyes of Hamas. Dead Palestinians lead to Hamas's cause, continuing to be on the front pages across the world. It's all about optics. But remember, civilian lives don't matter to Hamas, not even Palestinian lives. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. What you're about to see is a 2-minute presentation by the IDF Chief Spokesman, Rear Admiral Dani Hagari. The video was produced by the IDF spokesperson's office. As you listen, pay close attention to the photos. There are spectacular photos highlighting Israeli history. Clearly and concisely, Hagari paints a verbal picture of the situation today. He talks about who we are as a people, about what Israel and the Jewish people stand for. I could not have done it better. He is profound and truly inspiring.
I would like to speak to the Jewish people, Am Israel, here in Israel and around the world. This is a difficult time for us all. Hamas terrorists massacred our people in the most brutal and barbaric way. Israelis were slaughtered in their homes, families were taken hostage, and around the world anti-Semitism is now surging. This is a dark time for our people. But from the depths of darkness, we are rising up. We are fighting, and we will prevail. In this time of hardship, something has become clear about the Jewish people. We are one. We are united. We're in this together. Our hearts may be broken, but the unity of our people is unbreakable. The soldiers of the IDF feel your support, your love, your prayers. We know that we have a strong nation behind us here in Israel and around the world. We are determined to fulfill our mission. We are determined to defeat Hamas. Israel isn't just the home for Israelis. It's home for all Jews. It's home that we fought for, a home we'll keep on fighting for. This is a defining moment for the Jewish people. An important chapter of Jewish history is being written as we speak. The first stage of this chapter was tragic. But the rest of this chapter will be written by us, the people of Israel, the Israel Defense Forces, and you, the Jewish people. My friends, let me tell you how this chapter ends. Israel is in a war that it did not seek, and it did not start. But now that we're here, we will fight, and we will win together. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.